platform and where you're listening in from. Most welcome to our next episode where we're going to dive deep into what exactly is Web 1. What was the internet, the first version of the internet, Web 1, or what we call www.web 1.0. This is the version that was described as the read-only internet. Before social media, before smartphones, before YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, WhatsApp, there was a silent internet, a quiet internet, a humble internet, a version of the web where you wouldn't or couldn't comment, you couldn't post, you couldn't reply, you could only read. This was Web 1, the first chapter of the online world. Today, I want to take you back to a time most people have forgotten because the roots of Web 1 reveal the intention that shaped internet, that very internet that you use today. Let's dive in. This was a world that is full or hungry for information. Imagine living in a world without Google. Imagine a world that didn't have YouTube. Imagine a world without social media. Imagine a world without instant answers, Wikipedia. If you wanted information, you needed a book, you needed libraries, you needed teachers, you needed newspapers, you needed radios, you needed magazines. Like information moved slowly. People's minds expanded at a speed of paper. Knowledge had borders. Only the privileged had access to deep information. Humanity was hungry. Hungry for a world where information could move freely. Web 1 was born from that hunger. In the year 1991, Tim Berners-Lee published the first website in the whole entire world. The website wasn't colorful, it wasn't pretty, it had no images, no video, no animation, just a few lines of text explaining what the World Wide Web was. That's www, World Wide Web. But those simple lines of text were the equivalent of discovering fire. Those of you that have studied about the Stone Age, for the first time in human history, information was online, accessible to anyone with a computer. This was no small miracle. Web 1 was read-only website. You could go to website, you read, you leave. It was just static pages. Nothing changed unless the website owner changed it manually. There were no likes, there were no comments, there were no shares, there were no accounts. You couldn't go create an account. There were no profiles, there was no messaging. And only big institutions published content. Governments would publish, universities would publish, corporations could publish, new agencies could publish. Ordinary people couldn't. They couldn't post because you needed money, for the servers and a large knowledge base that you can keep people engaged. So the early internet was the one-way street. You receive, you cannot respond. The purpose of Web 1 was simple. Put information in front of as many people as possible. Simple. The world had never seen anything like this. News from America would be read instantly in Africa. Such papers became accessible globally. Universities uploaded news for the world. Basic research engines began to appear. Web 1 was humanity's first digital library. It was not interactive, but it was revolutionary if you think about it. Even though Web 1 looks primitive today, it achieved things that were unimaginable before. Number one, online news. Look at CNN.com and BBC.com appeared. For the first time, news traveled faster than TV or newspapers. See, email was Web 1's superpower. Like suddenly, messages arrived in seconds and not weeks. Search engines emerged. Before Google, we had Alta Vista, we had Yahoo Directory, we had Lycos. They helped people find websites. A miracle. At that time, online Wikipedias came up, the encyclopedias of these days. The encyclopedias of those days, the Wikipedias existed. Early websites hosted public knowledge, Then you also had university websites, the Harvard, the MIT, the Stanford. They began putting academic content online. People in Africa, Asia, Latin America suddenly had access to knowledge previously locked behind geography and privilege. Either in the right location or you were privileged to have access. This was powerful. So Web 1 was not social, it was not interactive, but it was beautiful in one way. It was the era of pure knowledge, no ads, no influencers, no algorithms, no distractions, just pure information. It was the internet in its most innocent form, humans sharing knowledge with other humans. Web 1 had big limitations though. There was no user-generated content, only website owners could post. People could afford to have websites. There was no conversation. You couldn't reply to the information. There was no community. Do they have followers? No. There was no followers, no count, no online friendship, nothing. There was no personalization. Every website looked the same to everyone. No recommendation engines, there was no identity. You couldn't log in. You couldn't have a separate account, no usernames, no digital self. It was read only, only read only. The information age had begun, but the social age had not. So people often think Web 1 had no interaction because the technology was weak, but that's not fully true. The deeper reason was the creators of Web 1 believed the internet should be a library, not a social network. They were answering a different need to humanity. They were answering the need for information, not the need for social networking. So their goal was information access, standard protocols, and a global connectivity. They never imagined billions of people sharing photos, videos, voice notes, or personal stories. The world wasn't ready yet for that. Society needed to learn how to read online before it could write online. Okay? Because Web 2 was hard, but the world needed the information, the foundation first. Web 1 transformed humanity. This is why it mattered. Number one, it democratized knowledge. Information became accessible, remember, to the poor and not only rich. Number two, it connected the world. For the first time, the entire world shared the same digital space. Number three, it backed digital careers. Programmers arose, web developers arose, IT technicians arose. These roles didn't exist before. It prepared the world for what was coming. Before people could create content, they needed a platform, and Web 1 built the platform. And lastly, it created the mindset shift. The world started believing that technology could solve global problems, because before it was not seen that way. There was no technology that was globally in the digital world solving problems, but the internet broke the barrier. This mental shift birthed the next era. Think about Web 1 like a newspaper. You can read, you can learn, you can explore, but you cannot comment, you cannot post, you cannot react, you cannot create content, you cannot build a profile. Web 1 is just a digital library. Web 2 never can be a digital community, whereas Web 3 is a digital economy, as we shall be explaining further. So the transition to Web 2 began around the early 2000s. Something started happening, and humans all of a sudden, they wanted to talk back. Like they wanted to reply to what they read. They wanted to upload their own thoughts, They wanted to share pictures. They wanted to create content. The world was ready now. It was ready for interaction. It was ready for conversation. It was ready for creativity. It was ready for identity. It was ready for community. This desire pulled the world into Web 2, the age of social media and the user-generated content. But none of it would have been possible without Web 1 laying the foundation. So Web 1 was simple. Yes, but it was sacred. It was the foundation stone. So in our next video, we will enter Web 2, the era that changed everything. The era where you became the creator, and no longer only the big institutions owning websites and servers could create. All right, see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.